new data today shows that the CDC has withheld certain information on vaccines, vaccinated people, deaths, and boosters, so as not to be misused or misinterpreted by anti-vaxxers. So this means that let me finish.
You're too stupid to handle the data. That's
So what's interesting, right, is that instead of having the conversation that the Canadian government comes out and says, here are the scientific studies that show that vaccines make us safer and are safer for everybody, and that's why we are making this law, right? And that we see it on par with gun legislation. They could say that if they had the data to back it up, right? But instead, the data seems like something that politicians do not want to discuss.
Yeah, and so the New York Times had a bombshell story about this, basically calling on the fact that more than a year, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has collected, I'll just read verbatim exactly what the New York Times says, data on hospitalizations for COVID-19 in the United States, has broken it down by age, race, vaccination status, but it has not made most of this information public. When the CDC published the first significant data on the effectiveness of boosters in adults younger than 65 2 weeks ago, it left out a huge chunk of the demographic. For some reason,
it left out ages 19 to 40.
18 to 49 year old.
18 to 49. That's even more.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, what I read said 19 to 40.
Yeah, 18 to 49 year olds.
Wow.
Just that huge chunk of data. Don't you think that would be important?
So anyone from the age of 50 to 65, we have some data that we have seen, right? But anyone who's in basically the prime of their adult years, we have not seen it yet. When asked why, the CDC says, well, it's not ready for prime time, which is an interesting...
I love that.
Right.
And remember, that demographic fits perfectly into the narrative of myocarditis.
It does, but it also, shows here that when you look at the death rate of people who actually were dying from COVID, it did seem to show that people who were vaccinated were dying in higher numbers than people who weren't. So let me find this information right here.
But really quick, is that of or with? Again, like we've...
Well, 13 out of 104 people who died of COVID in Scotland for the week of February 4th were unvaccinated. So that means that the remaining, 104 minus 13. So around 90 of them, 91, were vaccinated people dying of COVID, right? So this shows more vaccinated people dying of COVID than unvaccinated. In other words, 9 out of 10 of the people who die in Scotland are vaccinated, and the vast majority are boosted, and the death rate remains stubbornly high, even though Omicron is milder. So, okay, they don't want us to interpret that as vaccinated people die at a higher rate of COVID than non-vaccinated people, but it's really hard to know then how they want us to interpret that.
Well, what
right?
the hell are they saying that we're not ready? It's not ready for friggin' prime time.
That they need to massage the numbers.
Because they got to maximize their profits.
Here's your data. You're too stupid to you're too stupid to do anything with it. So we're gonna massage it ourselves and like my kid's playing with a ball of slime for a few hours. Like we're gonna massage it for a while and make it up and move pieces around so you can't actually understand what's being said here. And then we'll give it to you because you're too stupid to have this data.
You can't make inferences about this data. The data says something. We don't like any potential inferences about this, so we will not give it to you yet, because, and especially the booster data from, levels from 18 to 49 year olds, we don't have it from the CDC. We only have it from Israel.
Well, and the thing is, so they got to give these CEOs and stuff time to sell all their shares, to get out of the country, to make their bed so that they can be prepared for the information to come out. Then they might release it, but it's all going to be redacted. There's going to be vast of people missing. Swaths.
Meanwhile, the world still is operating on the assumption that if you've had that booster, you are free to travel, you're free to do certain things. I have had my COVID vaccine, but not a booster. But since I had COVID and didn't test positive in the lab, I don't have a recovery certificate. So in order to go places now, I need a booster vaccination, which I do not want because I had COVID so recently. But now I can't get on planes. I can't get into arenas because it's considered that my COVID vaccine, which was completed last July, is basically nothing. And I'm just so pissed about it because
Well, I mean, I love what they
Failure
say in
on
this.
conditions.
I love what they say in this piece too. Is that like about you break this down? The Glasgow Times, which you talked about, that COVID data will not be published over its concerns that it's misrepresented by anti-vaxxers, right? And
So why don't pro-vaxxers
let me
take a
finish.
stab at that?
And misrepresenting in this context means quoting from it exactly.
Right.
So we're gonna misrepresent you by literally citing your data verbatim. Like that's the concern. Rates of deaths remain lower in people who were not vaccinated than those who received 2 doses, as they have for months, according to these reports. And this was in part of the Scottish official charts that were just released. Don't we have a right to know that?
Well,
and I was going back and forth with an emailer with one of our viewers last night, was saying, because I had the J&J shot, and she said, Clayton, I'm surprised you didn't know this, but like Johnson & Johnson stopped producing the vaccine weeks ago. Oh, interesting. And now we have these problems with, towards Pfizer's vaccine, information about Moderna's vaccine and problems about that. You have shareholders that are worried about dumping their stock because of
Well, and
what's
have you
happened.
even heard of Johnson & Johnson vaccines in the past 6 months?
No, that's why I brought it up yesterday. And I heard from a couple of my viewers were saying, hey, yeah, they stopped making it. I'm like, oh, good. Glad I got that shot.
You asked for it. You weren't even supposed to get that one. They weren't issuing them and you went in and said, I'm not coming back here. Just give me the
Just
one.
give me one. I don't want to get multiple shots.
And you know what's crazy?
That's your fault.
What's crazy to me is like Dr. Peter McAuliffe and Dr. Robert Malone were both saying this from the very beginning and saying that, they were just trying to inform you of this data, that the main thing is people should have all the data when they make that choice. When you get your shot, you should be told, hey, this is the number of people that are dying. Like, this is the number. This is a potential hazard. This is a potential side effect. But they hid all of this information. And I think that's their biggest fear, and why these, CEOs are freaking out about their numbers and saying, well, we missed our profit margins this month, and it's good that the profit margins are going to way down now that people are finding out this real information.
Well,
But
don't you
this
find it
tracks, right, with the CDC story we did just about 2 weeks ago that showed that people who were exposed to COVID naturally actually did better with their immune levels than people who were exposed to COVID and vaccinated, right? That natural exposure to COVID provided a higher level of protection. This, again, continues to track that the vaccine is not the miracle that the media and the pharmaceuticals would have us believe.
Well, I mean, and look at the data that's being withheld. Okay, so according to these reports on, like, for instance, in Canada, right, last month, the highlighted data from the Canadian province of Alberta showed a huge increase in COVID infections and deaths in people after their first COVID vaccination dose, right? This was on their website. Then guess what happened? It was removed and deleted. This is the data that shows the number of days between first immunization date and COVID-19 diagnosis, right? This was deleted off their website. Don't we have a right to know this? No,
Right.
We'll just delete it. Here it is again, number of days between the first immunization date and COVID-19 diagnosis. Look at that. So you get the vaccine and boom,
You get COVID.
you get COVID.
That's exactly
but
what happened
we're going
to
to
us.
delete that. So what do we do with this data? We're going to hide it from you. Like this
But-
is the kind of...
This is the thing that is what these guys, like Dr. Malone was saying at the beginning. He's like, okay, so if you believe the lab theory, right? The lab theory is that they added a spike protein to a virus in nature. So you have a virus with a synthetic spike. So what they had to do in order to combat that is create a vaccine with a synthetic spike, which is something your body is not naturally made to break down. So they knew there were going to be these issues from the very beginning, but like nobody listened. And like you're saying, they're deleting this data. It's like, if they're deleting things, if they're not releasing information, that right there is enough to tell us something. They knew all along that something wasn't right.
Yeah, they knew from the beginning that something wasn't right, but we're too stupid to handle it. So let us know in the chat your thoughts about this. Well, I mean,
We got a $5 super chat. Somebody saying, please, Nat, don't get the booster. And I don't intend to, because I had COVID in September.
I had it too.
And so for all of the restrictions that I come up against now that shows that my vaccine certificate is no longer valid and it needs a booster, I just head out and get a test. Like, I'm willing to test as often as they want me to so that I don't get that booster, and that's my personal choice.
And meanwhile, hopefully, maybe the rest of the world leans towards what's happening in the UK right now, which the UK, Boris Johnson overnight announced that they were ending all COVID restrictions on Thursday of this week.
Even
All
if you
COVID
have
restrictions.
COVID now, he's saying if you have tested positive for COVID, we ask you to just show the same consideration as you would if you had the flu and stay home. And maybe that is a silver lining to come of this, because a lot of times people have the flu and just go out and spread it around. And maybe now we will all act a bit more considerate of that.
Yeah. If you like this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, we have a membership program. For the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism just by going to morninginvest.com/join.
You get access to exclusive videos, plus the ability to join and chat with us live. We really appreciate your subscription, and you are supporting independent journalism.